Thanks for joining us for Automate This Record Triggered Flow Patterns. And it's not a Salesforce presentation without the forward-looking statement. So just a reminder, Salesforce is a publicly traded company, so please base your purchasing decisions on current products and services and not on any forward-looking statements that Diana might be making. So I'd like to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for coming to the session, for everything that you do for your companies and for one another in the community. I'm Jennifer Lee, lead admin evangelist at Salesforce and the host of Automate This. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And I'm joined by an amazing cast. I have Diana Jaffe, who is the product manager for Record Triggered Automation. And then I have these amazing Flownatics here. Mark Jones from across the pond, Alex Radovanovic, Jen Cole from Boston, too, representing, and Michelle Hansen. All right, so I mentioned Automate This. Who has watched Automate This? Raise. Oh, I love this. Yay. Who's been on Automate This? Yay. Awesome. All right, so if you haven't heard of Automate This, we're on the Salesforce Admin's YouTube channel, and I feature trailblazers who solve real-world problems using automations. So you're going to hear from your peers, not us doing it, from your peers. And we talk about topics that are top of mind for admins, like record-triggered automations. And the best part is you interact with the audience and the presenters live. All right, so here is our agenda. We're going to talk about record-triggered flow considerations. Diana Jaffe will focus on that. I'm going to briefly cover the record-triggered flow design patterns, 4 of them that we'll cover. And then you have our amazing trailblazers who will go through and talk about their use case and the design pattern they chose to apply to that use case. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Diana.
Thank you so much, Jen. So excited to be here and part of Automate This. It's one of my favorite things the admin team does here at Salesforce. So I'm going to talk a little about how Salesforce looked at record-triggered automation. So when we started building it out in Flow, we had kind of 2 examples previously. We had workflow rules, which was very small, bite-sized, I would call it atomic pieces of automation. And then on Process Builder, it was sort of the extreme opposite, where all of your automation was in one giant process builder with branching decisions. So we had a question to answer, which is, how is Flow going to approach this problem going forward? And we went back to the very literal drawing board. These are real-world brainstorms that we were doing over in person and over Zoom. And what we came to was sort of, there's a variety of different options out there that are going to be applicable to your organization. So we really couldn't find a right answer to this. What we found is that it really depended on your company, on your business problems. But the one thing we heard is that following a consistent documented design pattern was really important. So we wanted to give you the tools to support you in structuring your automation, how best to suit your organization. And this really came down to 3 key areas that we heard that were focuses for people when they were building their automation. The first was performance. So how do I make it as performant and efficient as possible? The next was ordering, is how do I handle sort of interconnected or interrelated automation? And the lastly was organizational, which is most of what we're going to talk about today. So a couple key tips are things to familiarize yourself if you do have these concerns. Performance, a great thing to look at is our entry conditions as well as our save order optimizations. So making sure you're only running the flows when you need to actually do automation and making sure you're running them in the appropriate place to take advantage of all the resources. When it comes to ordering and sort of visualizing all of your automation, definitely check out Flow Trigger Explorer. You'll see a demo from Jen in a little bit. And also you can use that to reorder your flows. But lastly, the thing we heard over and over again is that the real crux of this came to sort of organizationally how you handle things. And there's a variety of concerns. Are you using Apex? Are you changing these automations a lot? Who's building them? Who's maintaining them? How are they documented? All of those things. And so what we really found is that it was going to be unique to your organization, which is why it's great to listen to other trailblazers who've already gone down this path and encounter different things. I think definitely listen, think about the challenges in your own organization or your own automation, and try to see if you can match or see common problems that different people were solving. There are different ways to solve this. And so taking these real-world examples is my #1 recommendation for thinking about how to structure your organization, even more so than just leveraging the tools. We also tried to capture some of these considerations in our record-triggered architects guide. So that's the URL here that we have, a tiny URL that you can go through and read if you want to kind of nerd out and read all the details. And with that, I'll hand it back to Jen to get to the stars of the show.
Great. Thanks, Diana. All right, so before we get to the demos, just want to cover the 4 design patterns that you'll see today. You might see a combination of a few of them. So the first one being multiple flows per object using trigger order. So rather than have one massive flow, you have smaller individual manageable flows per context. So that's your create, update, and delete. And then based on the trigger order that you give each flow, that will control the order to which they execute on that same object. Then we have record-triggered flows with subflows. So I love subflows because you're building it once, you're maintaining it once, but you're using it multiple times. So we'll see examples of that, and record-triggered flows with decisions. So you have the different paths that your flow will take once that goes through the certain path. And then lastly, similar to what you've experienced with Process Builder or Apex, that whole concept around one trigger per object for your create, update, or delete. All right, and then with that, I am going to hand it over to Mark Jones.
Well, thanks, Jen. And so, just so you can hear me all right, we're going to be looking at... Is this on? Yes, great. So, I'm going to be covering subflows in a record-triggered flow with also some decisions in there as well. And the particular context for this flow was a client came to me who's a non-profit client and came with the struggle of going, we have to create campaign member statuses for every single campaign. Can we have a way where this is automated? So for those who maybe don't know, campaign member statuses is a hidden object, sort of hidden object in Salesforce, where you have to create individual records for each campaign that you do. So this client wanted a way to kind of scale up, and they used the same kind of campaign member statuses for each campaign that they did, and they also had some separation for record types. So they wanted a way that was approach that was scalable, that was semi-automated, so we used a record-triggered flow for that. And I opted to use custom metadata for this. So for those who don't know, you are going to see custom metadata here in just a second. But custom metadata is a hidden object, is a setup object where you can actually create custom metadata objects as well as records. So let me try and tab across. And technical difficulties, have a look. So escape, yes, and then tab. There we go. So we're on here now. So inside of setup, you can go and search metadata, and then you can go to your custom metadata type object here. In this one, I've got one that is campaign member statuses, and you can see here I have added some custom fields here. These are all just checkboxes, and these correspond to the record types that the client was using. There is also a checkbox for responded. This is the default checkbox on campaign member statuses to say if that corresponds to the campaign member having responded to that campaign. So we've got this. And if I skim over to the next tab, not that tab, sorry, let's go over here and go to campaign member statuses. You can actually see the records here when this loads. And you can see I've created a custom list view in here just so you can see at a glance which of these statuses match which record types. So I've got event, fundraising, marketing, and volunteering, and then which ones are responded. So the flow will create all of these when it creates a new campaign. But before we do that, let's have a look at the flow. So I'm not going to go through all of the flow in detail, but basically what happens is this will trigger when a campaign is created. In this context, we wouldn't want to do it for update or both, create or update, because then you would potentially have all of your member statuses getting created multiple times over, which would not be a good experience. So what we do is we get the record type, and then we move into a subflow, which I'll show in just a second, and that will go around the campaign member statuses. I then do a count to check if there's any campaign member statuses being found, and that's just something for me so I can debug this and go, if there is no campaign member status records in the custom metadata object found, don't create anything. Just skip and finish off the flow. And I put that in there just for debugging purposes so I can check and see if, say, a client reported to me and goes, it hasn't worked, I can then check and go, well, did it find any records? It checks to see if it's ready to create. If it does, it creates. And I've also got a subflow, which we're not going to necessarily have time to see, but this one actually just takes out the defunct statuses of responded and sent, because those are the default statuses that you get in all campaigns. So for a lot of these record types, they weren't needed. So this subflow at the bottom here takes them out. And there's also some custom fault path messages in there just to say, if something's gone wrong, it flags up a message to say, something's gone wrong, here's what you need to do to have a look at it. Now, in terms of the main subflow that you want to see, this is the one that it gets all of the metadata records for that custom metadata object, and it just pulls them from that campaign member status. Nothing too complex, gets all of the records, stores them, and then we have a decision, which is what is the record type, and that just checks what the record type is, and that's passed through from an input variable, and then it just does a decision go, is it an event, fundraising, etc., and depending on which one it is, it will then go down, let's go to the side here, it will loop those custom metadata records. It has a decision here which checks if the checkbox on the custom metadata object is ticked. If it is, it then has two assignments where it creates a single record variable for each record. As you can see here, it just sets the label, the checkbox for responded, and also sets the campaign ID. Following that, it adds them to a bulk a record collection variable, which then allows us to create the campaign record member sales records in bulk in our main flow. And then for those where there is a change to the default campaign member status, it just sets which one is the default campaign member status here, and that's what triggers off the second subflow. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the flow, but shall we see the flow actually in practice? So, thank you. Always what you want to hear. So, we're on campaigns, and I'm going to do a quick demo of this. So, set up an event, and we're going to keep it fairly simple for time, but let's create a one for TrailblazerDX 24 and set this to active. In this particular flow, we don't need to fill out any of the fields, although best practice would be filling as much detail as you possibly can. But in this case, we're just going to click on Save, and once it runs, we will see if we go into our Related tab, if we scroll down into our campaign member statuses and go to View All, you will see that we have all the 5 campaign member statuses for that record type, and we've gotten rid of the old traditional responded and sent for this particular record type. Very clean, very efficient, and I will now pass back to Jen.
Awesome, thanks. Great demo, Mark. Okay, so I've had her on Automate This, I don't know, like 3-4 times now, so I'm honored to have her present Alex Radovanovic.
Hey everyone. For those of you who might not know me, who didn't watch Automate Live, I'll present. I didn't hear that. I'm Alex. I'm Senior Product Manager, Business Technology at Okta. And I'm going to talk about the mix of the two design patterns, which is record trigger flow with decision elements and then subflows. So to explain the business use case, whenever there is an incident or an outage or a maintenance, scheduled or unscheduled, we have an automation process that actually, oh, did I go to the wrong slide? Okay, thanks. So whenever there is an incident outage or maintenance, we have an automation process that creates an incident record capturing the value based on the type of the event that is happening. And based on the event, we actually have another business process that are handling what happens next. So once we created the automation process to create the incident record based on those values, our business partner asked us if we can automate the full process, meaning automating everything that's happening from the moment that incident record is created, including those business processes. So the best way to do it is to use the record trigger flow with multiple decision elements and then multiple subflows. And that is for two reasons. The first one is separation of concerns. The business process that handled records for the incident might not be the same as the one for the outage. So we wanted to create separation of concerns, have a subflow for each of these business processes. At the same time, second reason is that's a scalable solution. If anything changes with this business process, we can just change the subflow. We don't have to change the whole flow. If there's a new process being added, we can just add the subflow. And at the same time, we can reuse those subflows in different automation processes that might run in similar situation. So let me just go into that subflow, that flow to show you. Okay, so this is just a regular trigger flow with a simple start element. This is being triggered when a record is created, and we have just one entry condition, which is we are checking the status of the incident. If the incident is investigating, meaning it's in progress, we want to start these business processes. So we pull the information from this incident record, and then we hit the first decision element. The first thing we want to know is if this incident is marked as critical. So we look at the category value on the incident record. If the category value is one of these four values, if it's major service disruption, service degradation, performance issue, or service disruption, we want to follow a business process for the critical incident. We don't care about anything else. We just care if this is critical. So in that case, we follow this critical incident path, and then the business process is being handled in this critical incident case subflow. So let's look at that one. It looks like a pretty simple one. We have the create incident case element, and we are setting values for this type of case. And because this is a specific record type, it has its own values that needs to be set in these fields. And then we are also sending an email alert to the critical care team. We want to send an email with a specific template to the specific team, getting them to know what is happening. To follow best practice, I have a fault path here. We're handling faults in flows by creating platform events that will then trigger another flow to create an error log, and we also sending flow error notification. Let's go back to the main flow. So this was the critical incident path. If in this decision element we decide that this is not a critical incident, we still have different business processes to handle non-critical incident. That means we are going to do a next check, which is this incident impacting HTTP services? And then we're actually checking the issue type field on the incident record. So if the issue type contains one of these three values, we want to follow the business process for handling HTTP services. And that is, again, a different subflow. So let's look at that subflow. It's similar to the first one, but why are we handling in a different subflow? Because we are creating a different record type. We are creating case with different values, different fields. We are sending an email alert to a different team. And then the fault path is the same. So let's quickly look at this create element. You can see it's much shorter list of fields. So we are capturing just the important fields, and we are sending an email alert to a different team. If we run this business process, we also have a simple subflow that's setting case time zone. So if the incident is critical, we don't care about customer case time zone. We want this to be handled immediately. If not, we want to know which case time zone should be assigned so the support can reach out to the customer. So this subflow is pretty straightforward. It's called set case time zone. We are pulling the information from the account and then updating the case record that's being created with a specific time zone. If this is not a critical incident and it's not HTTP service impacted, we wanted to check, we have one last check, and that is if this is API impacted. So we're looking at the issue type actually has an API value. And if it is, this time we do not run the subflow because this is the use case that we do not have in any different situation. So this is a really good example of not creating a flow for the sake of creating a flow, create a flow when there's a need to do it. And so we just have a create record element here. We are creating a record with specific values for this type of case. And similar, we are also setting a case time zone based on the related account. And if none of these decisions are equal to true, then none of these incidents are actually require a specific business process, which means we are just sending an email to the incident team letting them know the incident record is created. So for the sake of time, I actually ran the debug log to show you so we can follow the path. So we have this incident record. We have category is minor service disruption, and then we have an issue type, which is HTTP 500. So how would it look like? That means this record would trigger this flow, and then we will come to the first decision element, wanting to check if this is a critical incident. We can see the category is not equal to any of these values, which is the path that's being followed here. So this decision element is following this outcome, not critical incident. So the next decision element is if this is HTTP service impacted. And we can see that the issue type actually contains HTTP 500, which means this is the path we're going to follow. We're going to trigger the subflow for the HTTP case. And you can see at the execution log on the side, we are starting the subflow, and then there is a create case element that is assigning the values needed for the case creation. We are also sending an email alert to the team that's going to take care of this. And then we're going into that other subflow, which is creating a case time zone on this case. Again, pretty simple. We are pulling the information from the account. We can see that the time zone is EST in this case. And then update records element is going to run, which in our case is going to run this flow. So back to you, Jen.
Great, thank you, Alex. All right, so we couldn't just have one Jen from Boston. We had to have two in a session. So very excited to have Jennifer Cole on here to show our next design pattern.
Thanks, Jen. All right, everyone. Hello. So I'm actually going to take a break from showing you a flow design. They're coming back. Michelle's got a great one. I actually want to talk about a feature you may not know is in your Salesforce org. So there's this great little feature called Flow Trigger Explorer. I got it right. I've been practicing that. And it's a wonderful way for you to actually see all of the flows you have for a record, whether you're creating, updating, or deleting. Is it an asynchronous path? Is it a fast field update? This is going to be a summary list for you, which is really replacing what some of us try to cobble together in list views when you go to your flow page. So I love this not only for getting a comprehensive view of all my flows per object, custom and standard, but I also can reorder them. And I love this because I have a lot of flows for my order record because it's tied to very specific business process with very tight entry criteria. So for me, I get to reorder these flows in the order in which my business process is running. And that just keeps the whole thing organized. And another bonus tip before I go into the demo is that think about this for your onboarding your admin team. If you need them to understand what flows are firing for what object, and maybe you're like me and you're tying them to business process in that order, what a great way for them to actually see those flows and start to think about and learn the business process and what is firing when and why. And bonus round, if you need to go in there and add a new flow, you get a shortcut. So I'm going to go into the demo, and because 2 gens are better than 1, let me find mine. That's not me. This is me. Okay, awesome. So right from your flow page, there's actually a little button. I dare you to press it. So here, I've already preset mine to order, but it's really this easy. You can come in and find your particular object of desire, and then you can even change. Am I looking for when it's created, updated, deleted? You got it all. And then it's going to group it by the flow type. So is it fast field updates? Is it actions and related records? Yeah, I know, I got a lot. We got a lot going on this order record. And then I've got my async path. So from here, it's just as simple as hitting the edit button. Maybe I realize number 5 and number 6 are actually out of order related to my process. So I can pick it up, I can move it, and then when I update, it actually gives me a summary of what I've changed. So I can drag and drop a whole bunch of them and then see the summary view before committing those changes. Just in case I made a mistake, I can back out. And then the last thing to show you is a shortcut. We're admins. We're busy. We want to save clicks for ourselves too, not just our users. So I love the new flow button. So if I'm going in there and looking at those flows to realize I need to tweak a business process, I could actually pick up a flow there and edit it. But maybe there's something new and it doesn't really fit with what's there. By using that new button, and I'm trying to talk a lot to catch up with the Wi-Fi, it'll eventually load, and I want you to see the shortcut benefit. It added the order object for you because I was hitting the new flow button from that page filtered on my order record. So hopefully you found some value in this little tip, and I'm going to pass it back to the other Boston Jen and close it out. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so last but certainly never least, Michelle Hansen.
All right, well, according to my watch, good morning, everyone. 3 more minutes. Okay, so for our last example, we're going to talk about using a flow with decisions inside of it. And with any good rule, there's always exceptions, right? So we'll talk about some exceptions as well. So this is going to automate actions based on opportunity field changes. And so we wanted to reduce the repetitive manual tasks that needed to happen throughout the sales process, make sure the right people are getting notified. And so I chose the pattern for this particular example of 1 flow per trigger context, so 1 on create, 1 on update, which is the one that we're going to show here. And then leverage a series of decisions to keep it all within 1 flow. This is a holistic view that's going to speed up build time because I can see everything that's happening on an update to an opportunity on 1 page. I don't have to keep bouncing from flow to subflow to subflow to go, did I catch all the changes? Do I know what's being impacted? Do I understand the implications of what I'm about to do here and where it should fit in? Also, this means I should have fewer flows to troubleshoot, which for a newer admin team might be advantageous. So those are just some of the things that I kept in mind as I was deciding on the trigger pattern to build for this. Now our exception. I wanted to do something cool, right? Post to Slack. Slack's an external system. Salesforce may have bought it, but they're still 2 separate entities. So therefore, this required an asynchronous path. Asynchronous paths have some very specific criteria that we'll show you in the flow here. So that forced me out of my 1 flow into another one, but that is definitely more of the exception than the rule. All right, so if we hop into our opportunity edited flow and we look at it, you can see here that there's branching decisions that go down the page. And so we'll zoom back in, but I wanted to give you kind of the overall view of it here. That was not the right way to do that, Michelle. Okay, so if we zoom in here, we've got a series of decisions. So the first thing that I want to know is, did we receive a logo? I work on the Midwest Dreamin' team. That's a local community conference in the Midwest. It's in Minneapolis. Shout out to everybody from the Midwest. It's in July. You should come. As part of the planning committee that's all volunteer, we need to make this efficient and easy, so this is why we're building flows. As we're getting new sponsors in, I want to make sure that our events team can give them tickets to the event, get them promoted on our socials, and so I need to know what's coming in. When we get their logo, we have what we need to start promoting on social media. So when I have that logo, I'm going to go through my yes path here, and we're going to get some task templates. These are going to create tasks that go to my social team that say, hey, we're ready to post this on social media and say, hey, thanks, new company, for being a sponsor this year. And because I'm going to do this with multiple tasks, I'm going to pull that into a subflow and just pass it the information it needs to create the appropriate task. But you'll notice that whether that decision is yes or no, we go down to the next decision to decide if they're promotion ready. To really be promotion ready, not only do I need a logo, but I need a company description. Who are you? What do you do? That way we can put you in our events app, we can put you on our website, and really get you as a sponsor the traffic that you want. Those two things could happen together, they could happen separately. So I need separate decisions in my flow. And so if I have both, we are going to go through the yes path again. We're going to build a separate set of tasks that go to my events team and say, hey, we're ready to put them here. Make sure that's done. Next, I want to make sure that I have a logistics contact. So I'm going to do a get on that. And if I found that we have that and it's needed for the stage change, we'll go to our final decision, which is what stage of the opportunity did we get to? So we've got negotiation, verbal agreement. We don't do a whole lot there, but as soon as we actually have a signed contract back, that's where I'm going to send them an email and says, hey, thanks for being a sponsor. Here's what we need from you, like, that logo I just mentioned. So it's going to automatically send that email out to the right contact as long as we've found that. And then we're going to build some more tasks like, hey, event staff, registration, go create tickets for them. That's me, by the way. So I like to tell myself what to do sometimes, expert opinions and all. But then finally, once we get the money, that's when we're going to release tickets. And so we'll say, hey, we've got them paid. Now we can grant them access to getting the tickets for their attendees to come. And so again, another email goes out with a registration link once those tickets are created. And so we can go through all of this in a single flow. It's great. I can see everything that's happening. And then all of a sudden, Eric Dreshfield, our founder, comes to me and says, hey, by the way, I need you to do one more thing with sponsorship. Can you automate a task that goes over to me to let me know that I need to reach out to them with some other information? I said, sure, I can do that. I can come back into this one flow here and say, when did you want that to happen, Eric? And I can add that in right here and see where it should be slotted in. Now, we all like to celebrate, right? Unfortunately, celebrating letting the rest of the team know that we have a sponsor had to go over here into a separate flow. So, and the reason for this is instead of just doing a very simple entry criteria of my opportunity was updated and then figuring out with a decision what on my opportunity got updated, my entry criteria here has to be very specific. I have to call out specifically that field stage name is changed and what it was changed to, in this case, closed one. So only when that specific change gets made will this flow run, and then it'll pull up our asynchronous path, which will take us to our post to the Midwest Dream in 24 Planning Slack channel. Because that's a separate system, it has to be done asynchronously. It can't be done as part of the same saved transaction in the database. And because that's an asynchronous call to another system, the start criteria forces me to do that in a separate flow. So one where I can, another where I can't, but it reduces the amount of troubleshooting that we have. And with that, Jen, back to you.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, so we're going to have a quick panel discussion. All the short links that we provided in the presentation can be accessed through this QR code. You'll get access to the playlist, all the awesome admin content, along with great resources by each presenter. So Subflows are great because you work smart by not working hard. You're building it once, maintaining it once, using it over and over again. So Alex and Mark, you both presented on that. So when you're building out your flow, do you know that you're going to build Subflows, or do you iterate on that and you're like, oh, that makes sense to be a Subflow? I'll start with you, Alex, and then Mark. Jump in.
Well, a shameless plug, we actually have an Automate Live episode on that one. How to do that, I always suggest before you start building a flow, and we always just want to click the button and trigger start a new flow, create a business process, create a mock flow. What you want to automate, what are decisions that needs to be made, are there any things that can be reusable, and then check that with your business owners, with your stakeholders, confirm that that process that you're creating is what they have in mind, and then you can decide which context the flow is going to run. If it's going to be a subflow, you can do it in the same flow with decision elements, or maybe you can use the formulas in entry criteria. So before deciding of subflow, decide on the business process.
Great. Anything you want to add, Mark?
Yeah, sure. So honestly, not to give the usual consultant answer, but it depends. But usually what I find is I'll try to map out what we're going to do in the flow first. Basically, I'll usually get like a notepad and write it through, and at some point I'll be able to identify, actually, that should be a subflow, like in the case the campaign member status is there. Another example I often will do is go, okay, what have we already got that's a subflow that comes into that? My classic example for this is custom notifications. I never ever build custom notifications out in singular flows. I always have that as an auto launch flow, which I use as subflows, and I build that for pretty much every client that I start working stuff in, because that's the kind of common use case where you go, right, this could be seen in like 10 flows, 5 flows. So I usually look at going, how often are we going to use this? And straight away that identifies whether that could be a subflow or not.
Great, thank you. All right, so multiple flows with execution order controlled by the trigger order is awesome. So Jen, when you're getting requirements and that requires enhancements to your process for an object, how do you determine whether to build a net new flow or go in and make enhancements to an existing one?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jen. I'm actually going to echo Alex. It's all about business process, right? So it helps to understand what your business is trying to accomplish from start to finish with that particular record, where information's going and to whom. So when I have a change to the business process, I first have to figure out which flow is that process best tied to. And is it a good fit? Is it just tweaking what's already there? Because I already have my create or my get or any other assignments that I can just kind of add into. Versus it's similar, it's happening around the same time, but it's happening by a different team. Then I might make that decision to make a brand new flow so that I can keep my entry criteria really tight and make sure that that flow only executes when it needs to. Otherwise, it gets skipped over and move down in the line to the next flow.
Great, thank you. So you all showed different design patterns, but you don't necessarily stick to the one and that's all the design patterns that you use. So how do you determine the best design pattern to use? And I'll start with you, Michelle, and then you all can just jump in.
I think there's a lot that goes into it. I look at the org that I'm in, what already exists. I also look at the team. As a consultant, I work with a lot of different companies. Some of them have admins that are, 6 deep, and some you hand over a project to whoever happens to be the smartest admin or smartest user in the room because there is no admin, right? And that skill level of who's going to maintain it definitely factors into how I'm going to build something out. That can also be dependent on, how often do I think this is going to change? Is this something that they have had a chance to iterate on frequently and this is pretty solid, or are we prototyping a concept and I'm going to go with what feels right and we may change as we go through here? But all of those things kind of play into it. And at the end of the day, there's more than one way to accomplish things in Salesforce. So make a decision, have your justifications, and stick with it. And then, we all know that sometimes you have to go back and reevaluate as things change. And tech debt's just a fact of life.
So we probably have one more comment if any one of you wanted to jump in.
I will agree with Michelle and go back to what I said about the business processes. You want to know business process, but to Michelle's point, there are other limitations. There are technical limitations with Flow. Maybe you have something that is pretty complex that might be better handled with Apex because you're going to hit per transaction limits with Flow. So it's technical limitations and then business limitations at the same time.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's wrap this up. So I think Lynn is in the audience here, but our next live episode of Automate This is on March 20th, and Lynn is going to show us how she used Flows and Experience Cloud to access Salesforce Scheduler and show us how she uses SMS text messaging as well. So check that out. If you already scanned the QR code, you'll have a link to this too. And again, QR code here. I'm part of the admin relations team, and we have great content for you admins. The favorite website to go to is admin.salesforce.com. Also, listen to the Salesforce Admins podcast hosted by Mike Gerholt and Jillian Bruce. And if you haven't watched the playlist, I highly, highly recommend it. So thank you for coming to the session. Thank you for all that will be watching this video on demand on Salesforce Plus. And for those in the audience, please take time to provide us feedback. We do take it very seriously, and this will help us create more content for future events. So if you did like the session, let us know. If you didn't like something about the session, let us know as well. So with that, thank you again, and have a great rest of your TDX.